So preface, it is going to be a mirror to Jimena's talk. We have not compared slides. We have not compared anything, which is going to be supremely interesting and funny in a few moments. But anyways, so why do developers occasionally ignore some of your designs? Let's begin. So let's start with what I mean by ignore. So as a designer, you hand over your designs to a bunch of people who are tasked to implement the design into a website, and then what comes out of as a consequence of their work is going to be different than what you handed them. And there are going to be a couple of these like differences. One of them is going to be chemming, because your perfectly designed thing is going to look different than what's on the web page. The other one is going to be the colors might be slightly off. I don't know if you can actually see it, but the two colors are slightly different. A third issue that I kept running into was designers would object to there being an outline on focused elements. Another one would be that the sizing is all wrong. Like you have this, I know, a 7-inch tablet design of 700 pixels wide, for example, and then what you get is a 2000 pixel wide actual implementation. So comes the question, why? And I'm going to go with the assumption that the front-end developers and the front-end engineers are really good at their job, and they want to do a good job. But due to browsers, standards, usage, ethics, and organizational goals, there will be differences between what the designers handed off and what the developers actually created. Because we developers want to do good work, but what does that mean? Does good work mean that we're going to do exactly as the developers sort of tell us to do, or does good work mean that we're going to use our skills and our knowledge in service of what the organizational goals are? And the difference between these two is going to create tension, and a lot of it. So let's look at what the organizational goals are. So one would be a fast website, and if I get huge images in raw format, then I'm not going to be able to build a fast website. If the organization wants cross-browser compatibility, then I'm probably not going to be able to build an elaborate animation, blur effect, or whatever that only Safari supports. If the organizational goal is accessibility, then I'm not going to be able to, remove those pesky outlines or just put text in an image. Or if I want, still fast website, I'm probably not going to be able to use a myriad of custom fonts. We also have browser limitations. So we can only use the fonts as they are in the file. We can't sort of move around with individual spaces, distances between two letters. We can change the distances between all of the letters or none, but that's all we have. We're limited to that. So we can't have custom kerning in the content. We have issues where the system color profiles are sometimes not adhered to by the browser. And I've run into this, and Una's run into this. Basically, Firefox just completely ignores your color profile settings in the computer, which means the same hex code is going to look different in Chrome and in Firefox because Chrome is using your system color profile, Firefox isn't. And then you can solve it because Firefox has that option. But yeah. Then, in browsers, pixels are integers, and I can't size something 43.3322 pixels. I mean, can, because CSS will understand it. It's just not going to have any sense. And then HTML and CSS implementation is varied when it comes to different bits of CSS and HTML. Then we have standards, which is the WCAG, which is the accessibility framework. You have to have minimum color contrast between elements in order to hit AA or AAA compliance with that, which means I can't have yellow text on white background because that is just not going to be visible to anyone. Similarly, I can't have blue text on red background because everyone is going to go, like, it is going to physically hurt some people because it's just uncomfortable to look at. You also shouldn't skip a heading. I can't skip from H1 to H3. I mean, again, technically I can, but I shouldn't, because otherwise the whole document flow is going to be messed up. And then no text as picture, because a picture can't be read by screen readers. And don't remove keyboard navigation. Also, don't remove the ability to paste into an input box. And lots of companies are today just remove that ability because it is going to be more secure, and then it breaks stuff like password managers. Then we have the usage issues. So as developers, well, as a developer, I used to get designs in a bunch of different preset sizes. And then the problem with that is that there is no, like, people view the content in widely different viewport sizes. Like, someone on an ultra-wide monitor can view your website in a 5,000 pixel wide screen, and someone on a low-end device maybe has 120 pixels. Does your design work on both of these? Then your design has pages of discrete content, and sometimes that is solved by hijacking scrolls, so that when you're scroll down, you don't scroll to like half an image so that the first heading. No, you're just kind of stepped into the next page, kind of like advance to the next slide in PowerPoint. Then you have a design which has preset places where an ad goes here and an ad goes here, and then most of the users nowadays use something like uBlock Origin or AdBlock or a Raspberry Pi hole, and then all of those spaces are either gone or just white or just broken. Fun fact, occasionally that breaks the JavaScript, though that's absolutely not the designer's fault, I suppose. Not I suppose, but it's like designers aren't responsible for that one. And then the other one is that occasionally I've run into situations where designers had, or CEOs or the clients had these expectations that as developers, we have control over how a client is going to consume that content. Like, we should be able to force the ad to appear there. And I'm like, I can't, because it's not in my power to do so. And then the next one is very much super important, which is not this, is the next one. The one after the next one is important because obviously I put all of this together 10 minutes before. Yeah, we also have an ethics thing. At least I think good front-end engineers and good developers should have this ethics things. As in, I will refuse to implement dark patterns. So if a designer says, here's a dark pattern, implement it, I would just say no. And then one of two things happen. A, I am fired, or B, the design gets changed. Or as C, I am reassigned to a different team, or a different team will create the design. Or when we require to put like 4,000 different social sharing thingies at the end of all of the articles, and then to the sidebar as well, because why not? Because people are going to share the content. And then there have been a bunch of studies where they pretty much found out that that's not the case. Essentially, if people want to share something, they're just going to copy the link and paste it into Facebook, Twitter, whatever. a button there isn't going to help them. Or, the 47,000 pop-ups for newsletter signups, compounded with the cookie and GDPR pop-ups, compounded with the whole, like news sites have this, the please subscribe and give us money on top of subscribing to our newsletters. And yeah, you just kind of arrive there, and then you have 4 million pop-ups, and then you have the memes where 20% of the screen real estate is actual usable content. Okay, so the super important, so back to this thing. No, obviously I can't select. Back to this thing, the next one is super important bit, is there is no fold. I can't put things above the fold. Or rather, it's somewhere different. I have no idea where the fold is. I don't know what or how big of a thing I can put above it. Stop asking me to put stuff, above the fold. Right. So what's the solution? How do we still work together when we have this opposition between designers and clients and developers? So don't do these. Don't attach your ego to your design, or don't take it personally when something isn't correct to the pixel. If good developers push back, there is a reason for it, and they will tell you the reason. I don't implement your design because I don't like it. I don't implement your design because I literally cannot implement your design the way you want me to implement it, because browser standards lacking the capacity or the capability of it. It's just, I can't do it. And don't ask us to do a bad job because that's what you think we should do. A bad job would be dark patterns or whatever. The one sort of class of developers that will absolutely do a bad job is one who has tried to fix organizational issues, couldn't, and have given up. And they are like, you know what? I don't care anymore. I'm just going to do whatever is required at a minimum from me to not get fired and still receive my pay because I have rent to pay. And then everything else is not my thing. Don't push developers to that point. Instead of fixed design, just give guidelines or design systems or patterns. Things like a header looks like this, like spacing around it, font size, color, or images are embedded like this, or our brand assets have these rules. Two good examples I have is the BBC's gel, which is their, I forgot what it's for, but the last L I think is language, or Microsoft Fluent Design system for the web. They are kind of like these modular things that you can put together. So that way we can just Lego the layout together once we have the content, and then everything is just going to work. And if a developer or a front-end engineer tells you that they can't or won't or don't want to implement X, just listen to them and try to understand what what's behind that, because we still want to do good work. And also, as a consequence, if you do these things, sites are going to be flexible. The CSS is going to be massively simplified because there's one rule for H1, and you don't need to redefine it based on which page you are on or which page template you're on. Colors are similar and in sync with everything. The templates become easy to work on. Implementation for new content or new content type, again, becomes easy. And developers will be a lot more relaxed and willing to chat, and they won't be in battle mode and is just going to, help with more human stuff like working together and team stuff. If you want extra points with developers, and I totally agree with Jimena that designers should not be required to code, but it helps massively if they know how HTML and CSS works, what's possible and what isn't possible. it helps massively if they know about networking. It helps massively what happens in the browser when a pop-up happens because of a JavaScript and everything needs to repaint it, and actually what the end result of that in low-end devices is. And what you can do is, if you have the time, just shadow them as they implement your designs, and you will learn a lot. So anyway, that was everything that I wanted to get across. And now,
Yay.
Yes, plus 1,000 on the designer shadowing thing.
Yes.
I'm glad you brought up the kind of design standards we have now, because I think you're probably in the same boat. When I was coming up and doing all this stuff, these widely accepted design standards really just didn't exist, and it was even way worse back then. But now I think about Google's material design standard, right? If you actually read through it and you do it as designers and developers both, I mean the guidelines fit both cases. What you should be doing as a developer with it, what the components, how they should work, functionally, but also how they should work from design. And so it really, I liked your focus on guidelines. And I mean, you don't even have to use these like Microsoft's or Google Material. It's great if you do, but it's a good point that designers still, if they're going to present something to an engineer, those are great examples of the way to present something to an engineer.
Yeah, no, I mean, for sure, those guidelines are a big thing, but I think, and it depends on where you're at, right? But in certain places, you do tend to work within your bubble. So it's like, oh, I know how this is going to work, but the developer can figure it out because it's clear, right? Like the design is there, but it's not, because you forget to think about that medium. And it's something that, funnily enough, is relatively new. Like education, as far as like education camps, do not have good resources and good plans to teach this, and how the way that print design is so standard and you have the rules for years and years of how it should be. The digital space still very ambiguous in that sense. Like I was talking to some of the professors and students at my school, and they have a web class where they do a little bit of HTML, CSS, and they kind of, know the medium. Everyone hates the class, but they take it, and in a way, whether reluctantly, they kind of do learn how it works, right? But they don't get why they should. So a lot of it's complaints like, I don't get this. This is annoying. Like, can I just go design a thing, right? But there's also not a lot of good design standards, and like, why should design care about accessibility, right? A lot of the resources you see are technical accessibility resources, right? ARIA and tabbing and this and semantic HTML and all that jazz. And other than color contrast, you don't see a lot of things to help guide designers as far as accessibility things or other types of things. So there is a long way to go in helping schools or any educational resources really help guide the designers on how it works realistically and not like, oh, I'm going to do this cool thing, right? Like even me, I'm still looking for like, what's a good standard? What's the best way to transmit this information? Because it'll always work when you go to the browser. So which is working with them since the beginning. Someone at some point mentioned the fact that sprints, was it you, Gabor? Like about the sprints, and it's like, oh, I have to wait another week for design to finish their sprint before I can see anything, when in reality, you should be in the sprint so that you can see what they're thinking about it. You can be like, wait, like that's probably not the best way, the way that our framework or our current, code base is set up, and that'll probably break, or it's going to be like a one case that it's not worth re-engineering the whole thing, right? But there's a lot of miscommunication, and also the training is just, we're still figuring it out. So it's weird. Communication is always the thing.
Yeah, but as an addendum to that, we've been doing print design for hundreds of years now, because books have existed for
a while.
Like 600 years or so. No, probably longer than that. printed books. When was
Wait.
Gutenberg? Anyways, so lots of years. And then, digital design, we only started dealing with this in like the 1970s. And even then, that was very limited. We only started doing like freeform stuff at the end of the 90s with Flash. And then, it's barely, 20 something years old. And we can't even stick with it because the medium is changing. Because right now we have these flat screens that, some of them aren't touch sensitive, others are touch sensitive. So you're going to be designing totally differently. Then you're going to need to rethink the entire design landscape for VR and AR and MR, because all of these are going to be interacted differently. All of those are going to be presented to you differently. And it's like, there's not one good solution, and we haven't even started scratching the surface of that, I guess.
We could have a panel just on this.
I was just going to say, I could just kind of listen to this for a while. I liked Red's comment. We need to do dueling talks at every one of these because I love the idea of showing two sides of the same coin.
We need to start having that's for future symposiums. We just need to be like, the panel discussion for this one is going to be blah, 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 blah. And then
I like that idea.
Yeah, but this was great. Thank you both.